and everybody will get a little thing on your screen that says, do you accept this recording? And then I'm going to admit everybody from the waiting room and turn off the waiting room, and we will start.
Okay, would you like me to keep screen sharing and keep it on?
You know, I'm seeing the, oh, that's great. And then start
okay.
when you're ready. Okay, thanks so much.
Yeah, it's good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the Native Voices in STEM series today. And it is a seminar series co-sponsored by the NSF NRT Indigenous Food, Energy, and Water Security Sovereignty Program. And this semester, we're happy and delighted to co-sponsor this with the Control Environmental Agricultural Center in the Department of Biosystems Engineering at the University of Arizona. In addition, we're continuing to partner with the Sloan Indigenous Graduate Partnership, the Water Resources Research Center, the Indigenous Resilience Center, and the Office of Societal Impact. My name is Carletta Chief, and I'm the director of the Indigenous Resilience Center. This seminar series highlights Native scientists, engineers, educators, leaders, and social activists. It offers faculty and students the opportunity to network, to learn about the research and careers of Native leaders and our allies that are doing work with Indigenous communities, and get best practices and advice to inform our work. Before we begin, I want to respectfully acknowledge that the University of Arizona is on the traditional land of the Tohono-O'odham people and the Pasco Yaqui people. In addition, Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized tribes, and we are committed to diversity and inclusion and to build long-term relationships with Native nations and Indigenous communities by partnering with them, ensuring that they are respectfully involved in leading those efforts, and then being of service, being a good relative by offering educational offerings, partnerships, and community service. Today, I'm so honored and very thankful to introduce our speaker, Dr. Andrea Yasmeen Carter. Dr. Carter is an outreach agronomist at Native Seed Search in Tucson. She works with farmers and community producers throughout the Southwest in supporting seed saving, seed banking, and arid land crop production. Dr. Carter is a member of the Powhatan Renape Nation. On her maternal side, she's a descendant of the Tunisian Amazigh Berber. And Dr. Carter spent time in North Africa, including an internship with the International Center for Agricultural Research in the Dry Areas, which seeks to improve the livelihood resilience of rural dryland communities. Inspired by this experience, Dr. Carter moved to Arizona to pursue studies in arid land agriculture. After completing her bachelor's at Cornell University in International Agriculture and Rural Development. Dr. Carter received her PhD in plant science from the University of Arizona, where she specialized in physiology of drought resilience in small grains, specifically barley, with an emphasis on water use, rooting depth, and root tip traits. She believes elevating traditional agriculture, land use, and crop selection practices will be one of the fundamental strategies to meeting the food production challenges of Indigenous communities now and into the future. It's my honor to now turn over the mic to Dr. Carter. Thank you.
Chief, it's really an honor to be here today to share some about my journey, my life. It's rare where you're given the opportunity to share more of your personal story. It's usually about work or research. And so I'm really happy and appreciative today to share some about myself with you all today. And I hope it provides some insight and inspiration to those listening now and in the future. So I'm just going to share my screen and we'll get going. My presentation about farming and seed saving in arid lands and my journey through these things. So as shared, my background is my father is African American and part of the Powhatan Renape Nation, who are descendants of tribes of Virginia, Southern Maryland, and Delaware, who relocated to outside of what was rural New Jersey. And my so that's my father. My mom is from North Africa, from Tunisia. My grandmother and matrilineal side are Berber or Amazigh. And these are the indigenous people of North Africa who have long inhabited the region prior to the various waves of colonization through the area. So that's a little bit about me. And I grew up in Maryland, but go up north to Vermont. And my mom would take us on the train and we'd go spend some time in more or less the woods of the Northeast. And the neighbors had an organic vegetable farm. And this is how I got into farming in the beginning, because I grew up in the city and the suburbs. So there wasn't much farming around the area. It was through this exposure of daycare being go work at the farm that I got introduced to farming and fell in love with it. And Joey Klein was one of the early organic farmers in that area, where he went through a lot of challenges through the years, but was really passionate about not using chemicals and pesticides. And he would let me go in that greenhouse there and I'd pick cherry tomatoes for him and eat as many as I could. But that did it for me. I said, I want to do this. I grow up and keep doing this. That was my goal, to work with farmers and be a farmer as well. So that experience led me to my undergraduate studies up at Cornell University, where they have a land grant office or their land grant institution. So there's a good agriculture program, and I was there to study international agriculture and rural development. And what I'll share about this experience for students that are listening is I was involved with ACES, the American Indian Science and Engineering Society, when I was a student there. And that was huge for me. The social group that was formed through that club was really wonderful as a network. And also the conferences that we'd go to, the annual or regional conferences. It was great to just meet other students within the STEM fields and to have the opportunity to travel and do some work within the college campus of raising awareness about issues that were of concern to Native students there. And one thing was living in Oswego for a year, which was the on-campus American Indian student housing. It was the first in the country that it provides. Oswego is the first Native student housing built in the country, and this model has expanded to other colleges. And not every school has this, of course, but what I'm sharing through it is that it really made a difference being in that community. And that housing was open to non-Native students, but it was really important, especially as a transfer student up to Cornell, that to find my people, to find my group, and that can be through various avenues, but it really made a difference and was very impactful to me to have that group. And through my studies, I got to travel some. I went to Cuba through the program, and that was great to learn about their organic gardens and their work on reducing water use. So one thing too was finding a mentor was really impactful. And while I was at Cornell, Dr. Jane Mount Pleasant was a professor, and she was really wonderful and inspiring and made a big difference in my academic trajectory. She was an agricultural scientist. She's Tuscaroran, and she's into indigenous cropping systems. And what she looked at through her Is it still?
No, we're missing your slide
Yeah.
deck.
If you could, it says it's disabled the screen sharing.
Oh, I didn't do that. Let me see what I can do.
Okay. About mentors. That was really important to find someone who whose work I was inspired by and who I saw myself in. And this, what she was looking at was that the Haudenosaunee or Iroquois cropping systems were as, if not more productive than contemporary European cropping systems at the same time in the 1600s, 1700s. And she used field trials to show this, of the energy content, the protein content, the diversity of nutrients, and calories was really impressive, and if not greater, in those traditional systems. And that's always, that inspired me in my work. And as Carletta shared, this idea of the elevating traditional practices being key to the sustainable agriculture solutions of the future. So that was really important to, should I give it a try now?
Will you please?
Absolutely, let's try it. Get it back on. Here we go. How's that? Cool. Okay. Stay Mount Pleasant. And so after finishing up my undergrad, I went to go visit my grandparents back in Tunisia and stay with them for some time. And while there, I was able to establish an internship at the International Center for Cultural Research in Dry Areas, as Dr. Chief mentioned, and they work to improve livelihoods in the dry areas across the world. And during that internship, I had the chance to travel to the south of Tunisia to one of their national institutes that works on projects like combating desertification, improving rangelands. And I said, wow, in these arid landscapes, there are ways both of traditional and new methods of dealing with improving the landscapes and harnessing native plants and practices to improve and maintain the health of the landscapes and the livelihoods of people dependent on those landscapes. So that was really impactful. It made a difference for me of wanting to study arid land agriculture. How do I learn more about this to, again, I started to see who I wanted to be. Through these internships, through different mentors and professors, it was really important to have an idea of that's the career. But again, you have to be exposed to it to know that, I feel, and that takes opportunities and an open eye and talking to people. But I was really fortunate to through my studies and experiences to start to see that, to say, wow, that's a job. You get to work with farmers and help them improve their land practices and work with growers. That's great. How do you get there? And the way to get there that I saw was most people had a degree in agriculture or level. So that led me to get to the University of Arizona. What I'll share here is, while in Tunisia, one thing I noticed were the traditional indigenous methods of landscaping and of growing that had been going on for centuries and allowed for an adaptation and a productive agriculture within these extremely arid landscapes. And I thought, wow. Research trials and that was great. But then I also got to see, wait a second, people have been living and in these landscapes quite well and have managed to work in harmony with those landscapes. So some of those methods I saw were jassors, which are in embankments, and they help slow runoff, particularly in steep mountainous slopes or canyons. So you'll see here how that would stop the water, and then you get big trees and and other olive trees to grow. So again, these are hyper-arid climates of southern Tunisia, but again, here was a traditional practice of holding in the water that would reduce erosion, increase the water table, and again, slow the speed of the water moving through when it did rain. Another system, and so you got the cultivation of grains like wheat and barley, but also, like I mentioned, the fig trees and olive trees and date palms. So really impressive. Here are just some of those photos from that region. The other system I learned about were tabias. So these are earthen dikes, again, to slow the flow of water. And this would be more in plateaus or lowland areas where it's less steep. And again, just to slow the flow of water, reduce soil erosion, and do groundwater recharge. And traditional methods that were highly effective in arid landscapes. So after that experience, I moved back home and I was working in DC at an urban farm. And this was about an acre in size, and we were growing vegetables for the local community and selling them through this mobile market that traveled around to different city neighborhoods to deliver fresh produce, which was certainly hard to find in DC. For sure, there are not many farms around, and I really loved this experience. And I share this because I think for many people potentially on the call that it go off to pursue studies because we get involved with a project or we're working with family or helping our community, and I was really challenged when I got into graduate school, but I was working here and I thought, man, I love this so much. My community, and I was really torn of whether or not to leave because I felt this draw to stay home and make an impact there. And it was a happy time to do that and work with kids, the direct impact. But one thing that a piece of advice that helped me was that my impact would have been within the Ledroit community. And that's important. There's nothing small about that, but I had an opportunity to impact potentially more people. And so that I sat with that a lot of, okay, maybe school and graduate school would allow me to kind of to help more, to be of service in a greater way than not going. And doesn't mean I can't go back and work in DC or back in my community, but graduate school, viewing that as a tool to kind of to share what had been given to me through education to more people and to others. So back to school I went. I came out here to the University of Arizona because, like I said, well, where can I study desert farming, arid land systems, and moved out to the Sonoran Desert here in Tucson. One thing I'll share here is I was a recipient of the Sloan Indigenous Graduate Scholarship, and that was huge. I would not have been able to do what I did, to go to school or be here today, I think, without that. So just a big thank you to that program for making that possible. And I know they've expanded the schools that have that program, but that provided a scholarship and stipend to pursue studies within STEM fields. Then my work at the university was studying physiological adaptations and rooting characteristics of drought tolerance in barley. And I didn't find anyone studying exactly what I was hoping, which were traditional practices. But I realized, okay, I'll work with Dr. Ottman, who was an extension specialist in small grains and forage crops, and I'll learn kind of the tools of agricultural science and the methodologies. And then I, hopefully like Jane Mount Pleasant, can use those to elevate traditional practices or complement new practices with some of those traditional practices I was trying to learn more about. So trials, and there were these varieties that some of you might know from the Green Revolution. We bred high yielding varieties that did great under high irrigation and high amounts of nutrients. But if you didn't have a lot of water or fertilizer, those yields were a lot lower. So there was this general understanding amongst breeders that we needed a new generation of crops adapted to lower reduced inputs, right? Less water, less fertilizer. And part of that was returning to more traditional crop varieties. So not the semi-dwarf conventional varieties that needed a lot of water like you see on the right, copious and cochise, but perhaps these low input varieties that were bred under low water irrigation conditions. And they originated from varieties from arid lands throughout the world. They had seeds from all over, and they just selected the ones that did well under low water irrigations year after year until they came out with these low water use varieties. So I was trying to figure out what is about those varieties allows them to grow under less water. And I did 3 years of replicated field trials at the Campus Ag Center in Tucson. That was huge because it was close to campus. I could ride my bike and hang out there. And now, one thing I'll say, if they're graduate students, we only use 2 years of that data in the final trial. So that's 1 year of data that I kind of had to. And okay. And I think we run into those things in graduate school. You put a lot of work in, a lot of your time, a lot of your energy, and but part of it is the doing of that. And that still, even if you didn't use that bit of information, it still informed your knowledge. So that's my takeaway from that hard lesson. But anyway, I was out in the field for 3 years, and I had lots of time in that barley field and lots of beautiful Tucson sunsets and quiet moments out in that barley field, taking all sorts of different physiological and water use data out in the field. And what I got really into, and part of why my talk is called Rooted in the Desert, is I got really interested in roots. How are these low water, drought tolerant varieties able to grow with such little water? Could it be something to do with their root system? So we would dig these root trenches out in the field. We did this 2 or 3 times each year. And I'd hang out down there with my radio and wash away the soil to expose the root profile of the varieties to get like this. And that took a lot of time. And why I share this is that, well, though the challenge can be all the time and energy you put into the data collection and work, it's really unique that you're given that time to do that. Unless you become a researcher, which many of you may continue on to do, but if you don't, you're not really allotted that time for simply learning or having a question, something you're curious about, and being given the time to explore that. And that's your job, is to learn more about the thing that you're curious about. That's really unique and special to be encouraged in an environment to just do that. So I look back now that I'm working very fondly on my times in the root pit, because it was a lot of time just to really focus in on this question I had. I did find that the drought tolerant varieties had more roots and deeper roots, and were able to penetrate through what's known out in the south as a caliche layer, this calcium layer that forms, or we get hard pans out in ag fields because the tractors just drive over them year after year and the soil gets compacted, but these roots went right through it, as you can see, and that's at about 3 feet down. They were growing. And I noticed things like, well, why are the roots thinner under high irrigation and they get really thick and gnarly under low irrigation? What is going on down there? And that led me to reach out to who would become a huge mentor and a good friend to me, Dr. Martha Haas, who was previously in the soil, water, environmental science department, now environmental science at the U of A. So I went around, my advisor didn't know about roots. He was a field extension agronomist. And I started looking around who works on roots. And I found Martha Haas. So she and I went deep into root exudates and border cells together. And it was good for me because I wanted to be a farmer. I wanted to work field scale, but here I was with a microscope. And it was different, but I think it was really good to challenge myself, do something different. And I don't know if I'll be working with a microscope again, but it was a positive experience to do that. And one thing Martha said to me that really flipped a switch was, you're a scientist. And I hadn't thought of myself as that. You know, I thought field, and she said, no, you're a scientist. Wow, look, you know, you're discovering these things, you're exploring these things. And that was really impactful to think of myself as that and to have someone see me as that. So again, the value of mentors, it can be your advisor, it doesn't always have to be. And seeking others out in the university who you're interested in their work, don't even have to work with them, but someone who you can get along now. And just say, after school, I taught at Tohono O'odham Community College. This was great. I had graduated and I said, well, what's next? And in the spirit of the Sloan Graduate Scholarship, part of it is to increase Indigenous voices and presence in academia. And so I thought, okay, let's see if they're looking for teachers locally, and they sure were. So I taught plants, people, and culture and agroecology out at the campus and online, and that was a wonderful experience. I encourage postgraduates to look into teaching at tribal colleges. There's a big need, and it was super rewarding and a great first teaching experience out of school. So that brought me to Native Seed Search soon after, where I started about 2 years ago. And I've been there ever since. And I'm going to kind of move through. We can talk about what Native Seeds does in the question part, but big seed collection. And I'm going to skip to pictures of farms, because I think that's what would be of interest to many here. Native Seeds is a seed conservation organization in Tucson. We do seed banking, seed distribution through different programs like community seed grants for community gardens. And this is what I wanted to share is there's a huge increase, and I think interest and for growing and eating these foods. Those that are adapted, those folks have cultural connections to. We're seeing it more and more, and I'm more folks who want to do this, who want to learn more. And my hope through Native Seed Search and for those of you at institutions like the university is, how can we support these groups in what they're doing? Because that excitement is there. Supporting seed banking within tribal communities of the region is my focus now at Native Seed Search. And to Carletta's point of what some advice when working with tribal communities, building relationships has been huge. And so I've been there for 2 years, and going out to visit, spending time with, eating dinner, spending the night, when, you know, being present with the folks I'm working with that's the ticket, I think, for this line of work. And I think for others who are trying to or actively working in tribal communities, building relationships, then it's a process of reporting back, right, with my organization, with the director, and then reflective programming. So the grant writing, the fine-tuning of our programs, that comes out of the time spent with partners, informing what we're doing, right? Because I can have ideas of, well, this would be a great workshop, or we should apply to do this thing, but it's really got to be dependent and driven by those who we're working with and serving. So that's my big push is getting out there, building relationships. So here's me, I'm out of the barley field now. So I feel really good about that. So and in the community. So we're handing out flyers, promoting seed access as much as we can. We were at the 4th of July Ag Expo at the Navajo Nation Fair and probably talked to like 500 people. It was a party and got the word out. But again, being out there talking to folks, doing workshops is a lot of what I do now on seed saving. We're about to have one next week with this group out of Jimenez Pueblo, which is cool. And this was up in Santa Fe, doing a seed saving workshop at the Institute of American Indian Arts. And I work with farmers. So that's the last kind of wrap up is, like I said, with the community gardens, there's a lot of interest from growers, whether they're starting out or they've been growing, they'd like to grow arid adapted crops, traditional crop, or just be farming something in general, growing food for themselves and to share with their community. And again, how can we as institutions support that process? So, you know, we can do that through the seed, but it's also the visiting. So this is Courtney Lewis and Monique Knox, 2 young women out in Fort Mojave. They didn't grow up farming. They're learning how to do it. And so spending the time with them and then that informs kind of how I, what my outreach program looks like and what Native Seeds outreach and support can look like. So I think I'll wrap it up there and leave time for questions. Here's more. This is a good friend, Dr. Shelly Valdez up at Laguna Pueblo, and she's been a great proponent of the relationship building and spending time together. So they put me to work in the cornfield harvesting, and that's her son Kyle Swimmer, and just it's been really impactful to spend time. And I've been up to visit her about 2 or 3 times, and each time we, you know, the relationship strengthens and our work together, the impact of it gets a lot better. And that would be my takeaway for those working more and more in tribal communities, the relationships, and that there is this interest in food and farming and how can we support more growers. So I just want, I'll post up my, that's my email at Native Seed Search and number, and I'm happy to take questions with our remaining time. And I know I had a lot in there. Like I said, it's special to be asked about your journey, but
Great. Thank you, Dr. Carter. Also want to note that your audio is going in and out, so you might want to switch your audio to phone while we start the Q&A.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So there's some feedback. Okay. Thank you so much for your seminar, Dr. Carter. That was so insightful, and I love to hear your journey, and very similar to many of our students, and just inspirational how you've incorporated your upbringing all the way to your family and across the country and locally. It's very inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing that with us and your knowledge and wisdom.
Thank you.
So now we'd like to go into a Q&A, and we'd like to ask the audience to go ahead and ask their question. So just unmute yourself, and we have until 12:50 for questions, so we have a lot of time. So encourage the Indigenous students to ask questions as well. Oh, okay, we have one in the meantime. Oh, Daryline?
Yeah,
like
Daryline.
Daryline.
Yeah. Hello. I appreciate your presentation. I really definitely enjoyed it. As far as, you know, I am a Dinesh student here in Kansas, going to school at Kansas State, and I'm going to be graduating soon. I just kind of want to kind of, I enjoyed your whole having to go to other communities, especially those tribal communities. And that's what I'm kind of looking in on my perspective is, there is some tribal communities here in Kansas, which is the Kickapoo and Potawatomi. I just kind of want to ask questions as far as, going into a tribal community, is there any challenges that you faced as far as, understanding their perspective? Because I am Danette, and I know that there is some tribal perspectives that they have different from us. So I just kind of want to have your insight on that.
Sure, that's a great question. How do you begin that relationship building? I think what's helped for me is a patience and a respect for the hesitation. That there's a reason for it. It's not personal. It has nothing, at least, I'm hoping maybe it's not necessarily about you or where you're from. It's just you're maybe not from that community, and you understand well, I think, by your head nod that there's reasons for that. So it's not personal. And I noticed that once people notice that I'm okay being patient or not pushing, or I understand, then there's an openness. But I think if I had pushed it more and said, well, come on, I want to work together, let's go, this is so great, I have all these seeds or these programs, there would be more hesitation. But to respectfully be patient and understanding of the hesitation, that actually open the door more. Yeah, it just takes some time.
Thank you so much. You answered that perfect.
Okay. Good luck. Yeah.
Thank you for joining, Darlene, all the way from Kansas. So wonderful to have you join us, and you're always welcome. So we try to make an open dialogue to help all students. Great, thank you. We do have another question that was posted in the chat by Luke Preston. And he said, in academia, we do a lot of learning by reading academic papers. But I imagine for your research, talking to farmers would likely be extremely valuable, as they have insight that you can't find on the internet. In your research, where are you able to get input from farmers? And if so, how did you do it ethically without engaging in knowledge extraction?
Great question. For my research at the university, for my graduate research, it wasn't farmer involved. It was really the field trial. So I was reading the papers and then doing the field trials and collecting data. So it wasn't farmer involved, but moving forward, I think I could see that being part of it. For example, if we were to ever do some research on what are good drought adapted varieties within the native seeds collection, or what's a good tepary bean for low water, or a corn variety. And I think one thing is that any research that's partner involved in the future is led by the growers. So it's their research question. And that's come up because I've asked growers I work with, I said, do you have any interest in research or something you're curious about? I said, oh yeah, for sure. And our problem with research isn't research overall as an umbrella term is bad. It's that research of the past was not to our benefit, particularly if it was using our knowledge or our crops. So if it's a question that is led by the grower, then I think there's an interest in that. And as long as it's participatory in that way, and beyond participatory, farmer-led, that they're involved from the get-go in the research question. And that's great for, I think, probably the only way I could do it, because I'll need the farmer to have interest and motivation in the research question too, if I go out there with my own question, it might be interesting to me, but if they don't care, that trial's not going anywhere and the data is not being collected. So I think from the get-go that it's worked out with the growers in partnership.
Great. Luke said thank you. Great points. Any other questions out there? Okay, we have one from Jackie, who's also an IndigiFU student. She said that she will definitely follow up on your work at Native Seed Search while she's working with students at families at Star School in Loop, Arizona.
Cool. Yeah, that'll be good. I think they were community seed grant recipients, so that's good. Yeah, it's an inspiring time. I think that there's so much energy around these things, around food, growing, health, yeah, water. I think I'm sure many of you here are noticing that through your work, and I sure am. So nice to be.
Yes, definitely. Any other questions?
I have a question. How do you prioritize which seeds to save and how to distribute them when people make a request?
Sure. There's a few ways. First, we have, with so many different varieties, we have a list of what's in low supply or what hasn't been grown out in a long time. So therefore the seed is older. So to maintain the health and availability of the seed, that's what's kind of guiding the growing out of the seed. Now, what to distribute, we have like a core collection of what is most sought after of different varieties of corn, beans, and squash. But our goal is to make as much of the collection available. So that's what controls that is how much we can grow here in Tucson at our gardens and how much we can grow in partnership. But one thing I do a lot with growers is I have a list to work off of. That's put together by our seed bank manager of here's our priorities, because again, either low supply or it's been a long time. We also work with growers who say, hey, we're looking for this variety. We don't have it in our community. Do you have it? Sometimes yes, sometimes not. But when we do, we'll work with that grower to start growing out that seed with the goal of seed availability, and that seeds are in communities where they're from as much as possible. So it's a flexible thing but always with the goal of seed distribution, seed access, seeds being shared.
Quick follow-up. Are you seeing a change in the types of seeds people are requesting given our 2+ decade drought and the concerns about the Colorado River water being available?
Yeah, something that's come up a lot are tepary beans. Yeah, as a cover crop too, which isn't something they were used for before. It's a food crop, so that's not our focus. We're really trying to focus on these seeds being available as food, but even people have asked for the wild tepary. Like I work with a grower up in Shiprock, and they're planting wild teparies as a nitrogen cover crop was the idea. So yeah, for sure the teparies, because those are a very low water use legume for the Southwest. For those of you out of region, they're a traditional food crop that were consumed. It's a wild bean that was domesticated over years and grows with not much water, and it's really impressive. And so that's one that I think people are increasingly interested in. Yeah. But yeah, overall, I think just connecting to food crops. People say, well, I bought my seeds from Walmart or Johnny's all these years, and I want to buy something or start growing something that's from here from where I'm from, and even better if it's something that I'm culturally connected to.
Okay, we have a question from Francis.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you, Dr. Carter. That was a really wonderful presentation. I loved how you tied in both your personal connections to the topic, but also your graduate school journey. And that was it was fun to see photos from, I know exactly where the Campus Agricultural Center is. So that was really fun to see where your work was. Kind of in tandem with Kara's question, I was wondering if part of your outreach and encouragement in engaging with these traditional crop seeds includes the traditional agricultural methods, like you kind of mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, and if the specific cultivation methods that you see people using with the seeds is being impacted by the availability or lack of availability of water.
Great question, Francis. Well, we don't have control or discriminate on how the crop is grown when it comes to sharing the seed. The goal seeds are being shared through retail, through free seed programs, through farmer partnerships, and how they're grown is up to the grower. Now, that being said, we do work with growers who, just like they're trying to grow a traditional crop, are wanting to do that in a traditional way. So that's certainly occurring, and it's awesome to see that return. I think one challenge that growers have had with that are dry farmers, dryland farmers. So, and that's been a challenge for growers as things get drier, and also as a lot of challenges are infrastructure. It's because of, like in New Mexico, the acequia system. So there's some challenges with that, with traditional production in that way, but there's an interest in keeping that going and keeping the seeds grown within those systems to maintain that adaptation. So it's kind of a balance of growing out with enough resources so you get a seed crop, but also growing seeds under conditions to maintain their arid land adaptation. That's growing under dry farming conditions or with less water. So yeah, it's something we're trying to balance in our partnerships, and a desire to support traditional farmers, dryland farming, but also this balance of the associated risks. But it's cool to see that interest peak, and I think people are trying to figure more and more out of how was it once done, and that's something we're all. I think that's a bigger question than today maybe, but that path of reconnection, what that looks like, and how you learn those practices of before. And I see Chile Yazzie on the call, and young people working with farmers who might be a little older and wiser is a good thing to do. I think he might agree to learn those while we have farmers who might know more about these ways.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you, Francis, for your question. We have, I wanted to ask one more combined question before we end our seminar, but we have two questions that are a little similar. So you can just think about both of these questions. So the first one is, how are you able to spread the word about your organization and mission to farmers? And is it difficult to make contact with farmers to build a relationship? And are you getting more interest from larger farms as well, in addition to seed sharing and savings? So I think first question is more about the local indigenous farmers, and then the second question is about large farming industries.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. When I first started, it was slow, but people would reach out to us. The word would get out, but it was pretty quiet. And sometimes I'd call people and I would do some outreach. again, a relationship building. I'd meet someone and someone would say, well, I'll talk to this guy, and they would just build through that. And that I've watched that grow over these 2 years of you meet, you start working with one group and they'll introduce you to someone else, and that just spreads. So there's a little bit of that, but then what's recently happened is through that network, well, just this past week, that flyer I showed of the partner farmer got shared on Facebook somewhere, and it got shared, I think, through the Traditional Native American Farmers Association that Clayton Barscoupe runs out of New Mexico. I think he emailed it out. My inbox is out of control. I mean, yeah, I was so, and my phone's been ringing. That's why I did this from home today, because people are calling. And so the word got out, and it was really interesting. So it's a very timely question of, it was quiet, and I was doing the outreach, connecting with growers, visiting, and then now just the word got out in the right way to the right folks, and it's just spread. It took time for that, and I understand that. Again, I wouldn't, it's for the best. There's got to be trust and a relationship, and a few people have worked with us and it's gone okay. But it sometimes it just spreads real quick. So that's worked out. That's how it's gone out. But again, the tabling, the flyers, the relationship building, that's the core of it, of how the word's gotten out. And then in terms of larger farmers, not so much, not larger farmers. And part of that is we don't have the quantities of seed that they could plant. So we had someone, for example, they asked to buy tepuis for a cover crop, and we said, A, we don't have enough to do that. And A, our focus is food. So, but B, even if we did, we don't have 10 acres worth of beans seed. We're working towards it. That would be awesome, but we're working in really small quantities of seed. So the larger farmers haven't called yet about that, and if they did, we don't really have much for them at this point. Yeah.
Great. What an exciting conversation here, and I'm really looking forward to this continued conversation. So I want to thank Dr. Carter for being here with us today and for sharing her knowledge on this important work of food sovereignty with Indigenous communities. And so I think it's very timely in our program, as well as thinking about resilience into the future with water shortages. Mm-hmm. So we look forward to connecting with you more, and thank you to everybody who joined and the co-sponsors of the seminar. I invite everybody to attend our next seminar, and there's a website that we have where we have all the recordings, and you can look back to prior years for different topics and share it with your friends and your colleagues. Our goal is to have a welcoming dialogue on working with Indigenous communities around food, energy, water. And so thank you so much. Our next seminar is going to be March 1st at noon with Dr. Ruth Plenty Sweetgrass She-Kills, who will be speaking about food sovereignty in the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arika nations. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you all.